Hi, welcome to Tikun's weekly Davar. This week's portion is Acharei-Kedoshim. It's a double portion, the book of Leviticus. And two of the commandments in this portion, the commandments don't bear a grudge and don't take revenge. Rabbis explain what they are, what each one is. Taking revenge is somebody comes to you, it's pretty obvious, somebody comes to you and says, "Can I borrow your hammer?" You come to somebody and say, "Can I borrow your hammer?" And they say, "No, get lost." And the next day they come to you and say, "Can I borrow your screwdriver?" And you say, "No, get lost." Taking revenge, pretty obvious. Bearing a grudge is a little similar thing, but a little bit more subtle. And that is, you come to them one day and say, "Can I borrow your hammer?" And they say, "No, get lost." And they come to you the next day and say, "Can I borrow your screwdriver?" And you say, "Of course you can borrow my screwdriver. I lend things to people who need them, unlike some people who I know." Now, it's pretty clear what's wrong with revenge. Two wrongs don't make a right. But what's wrong with bearing a grudge? At the end of the day, you did lend him the screwdriver that he needed. I think there's an important principle to understand here. Fundamental principle in Judaism, in Torah, and that is that the commands that we are given in Torah are not so much for the one benefiting from them, but they are more so for the one who is keeping them. You know, when it comes to love your neighbour as yourself, the purpose of love your neighbour as yourself, the purpose of that commandment is not so much because that will help make the people that you love happy. It's much more so because living from a place of love vastly increases the quality of your own life. The reason for giving charity is not so much because you want to help poor people who need money. It's a nice thing to do, but God could do that himself if he wanted. The reason for giving charity is so that you can give. You can be a giver and you can be like God. So too over here with not taking revenge. When you give somebody and you lend him back and you do it, but you give a verbal dig at the same time, it means you haven't forgiven them. And a place of resentment is a horrible place to live. You know, he might have prevented you doing some hammering. That's what the guy's prevented you from doing. But if you resent him for doing so, what you've done to yourself is a lot worse than what he did to you. As infuriating as it might be, because we always like to see people get their comeuppance in the world. We like to see justice done and the right king who comes through in the end. At the end of the day, forgiveness will always add to the quality of life more so than resentment. So the purpose of forgiving, as opposed to not bearing a grudge, is to improve the quality of life of the forgiver, not so much the quality of life of the forgiven. Now that doesn't mean to say you have to be a doormat. That doesn't mean to say that people do terrible things to you and you go around, "I forgive you, I forgive you, I forgive you," and you're just a doormat, everyone takes advantage of you. You can stand up for yourself for a place of forgiveness. It's not contradictory. You don't need to ignore the fact that people are taking advantage of you just because you forgive. All it means is that you don't take the whole thing so personally. You don't do it from a personal place. You kind of recognize, part of it is kind of recognize that we're all going to be dead in 100 years' time, probably a lot less than that as well. Are you really going to remember the hammer? Are you really going to remember in 100 years that the guy didn't lend you a hammer? Well, you're not. And if you're not, then what's the big deal now? Does it really matter? Move on. Lend with love. Don't let resentment deny you the pleasure of doing so. I know this isn't an easy thing to do, but it's a much, much, much nicer way to live. I wish you Shabbat Shalom. If you're interested in finding out more about Tikun, please log on to our website, tikun.co.uk.